Is technique important in running? I never really thought about this a lot because my previous coach didn't believe in specifically working on form. He used to say, just run more and your form will get better. Over time, I discovered that there were running form systems out there like pose method, and they seemed to have people all attempting to do the same kinds of things, like run at 180 steps per minute. It all seemed kind of complicated at the time because I just wanted to run. With time, Garmin watches started measuring running dynamics like vertical oscillation, and I had heard that if you bounce up and down too much, then you're not efficient and therefore wasting energy that you could better spend moving forward instead of vertically up and down. Having studied engineering, this seemed logical. But what if it's not supposed to be logical? So today's book actually explains why vertical oscillation while you're running is not bad. Hi, and welcome to the Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review running books to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running or maybe inspire you to try something new. My name is Liz, and with my co-host Alan, we're going to talk about a new book by author Shane Benzie about running form, and the book is called The Lost Art of Running.
The Lost Art of Running is one part story, one part self-improvement. It's actually divided into three pieces: the journey, the foundations, and the practical aspects. Shane starts off by telling the story of how he noticed in some areas of the world, runners seem to have a nicer running style, seem to be able to run faster with less effort. And this observation eventually leads him to wonder if this quality can be taught to anyone. Shane ends up traveling the world in search of how he can teach good running form and lays out a basic foundation that we can use to try and help improve our own running. So let me tell you a little bit about Shane Benzie, the main author. Shane is a running technique coach and movement specialist. He's traveled extensively, we're going to hear about that, to work with, live with, and study a wide range of athletes and indigenous people in different, sometimes extreme, environments. He's collaborated with an impressive list of successful athletes and teams, including Tom Daley and the Great British Diving Team, Team GB 24-Hour Running Squad, Wilson Kipsang, Tom Evans, Mohammed Hansel, Nikki Spinks, Mimi Anderson, Beth Pascal, the list goes on, Elizabeth Barnes, Damian Hall, Dan Lawson, Lawrence Stedman, and Pavel Polonsky, who we saw do some fantastic races in the Montane Spine Race. He has research collaborations with the University of Kent in the UK and uses some state-of-the-art sensors and techniques with runners in the wild, in their own environment. His new running website, Running Reborn, is a great new resource if you want to go deep into running form improvement. In the book, there's also a reference to a co-author, Tim Major. Tim Major is a senior music industry executive and a weekend warrior in terms of running. But he's also an experienced writer, photographer, and running obsessive. He's written and provided photographs for magazines such as Men's Running, Trail Running, Country Walking, Adventure Travel, and Ultra Magazine. We were hoping to have Shane Benzie here to talk with us, and he kindly offered to come on. He's been pretty occupied at the moment with his new running website, Running Reborn. And in fact, a fantastic gift just post-Christmas might be to go and get a subscription to the Running Reborn website and have a look in detail at the form tips and opportunities to improve your own form and your own running. He's put a huge amount of video effort into some of the analysis there. And because of that, with our scheduling, we weren't able to get an accommodation. Thanks again, Shane, and hope Liz and I, doing our own analysis, will do you justice.
First part was, I guess, how Shane got interested in running technique. I think he started out teaching running technique and then discovered that what he was teaching was not producing the results that he saw that he wanted to produce. It's subdivided into chapters that talk about different places that he's been, things that he's observed, and it's sort of a description of his journey into running form. The first chapter is about when he was in Bikoji, Ethiopia. He saw the runners over there, and the runners, like at one point he says, they seemed to be, it seemed like their legs were incredibly long when they were running, but when they were standing still, their legs were sort of like normal length.
Yeah, and he attributes that to their flexibility and the way that they move, the way that they stand, their posture, and the way that they move. I guess even before that, he looked at he looked at how not only people move, but how animals move. I was kind of surprised that for a running analysis book, that he would start off with references to voyaging to see sharks. He went into a place called Shark Alley. The place was called Dyer Island, and he studied sharks up close, fulfilling his own desire to travel and be a crazy adventure hunter, which he clearly is, but also looking just at the movement and the elastic, flexible movement of animals in general. And then goes off to Bikoji in Ethiopia, where people don't know. It's a village where they've produced a very disproportionate number of Olympic class middle distance runners, partially because it's at altitude, a little like Kenya, but also what Shane says is that it's also because the people there move in a certain way. They've never had desk jobs, and they've worked outside and in farms, and have always had a certain type of movement and posture. And he started to get hooked onto this idea that this was critical in optimizing your running performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he noticed that that in the less developed areas of the world, that's where they had the nicest running form, and that's also where they had the least amount of conveniences. Like, people didn't have desk jobs, most people were farmers, and they seem to move better when they when people are from this kind of background. But he didn't know why, and then eventually he ends up coming across a course given by James Earl, and so James Earl introduced the idea of fascia. This allows us to move in a way that's elastic. It's our elastic system, and for Shane, it was almost like it was a bit of an aha moment, I think, kind of like he was like, well, this must be the missing piece. After that course, he ended up trying to look for more information about fascia, but there wasn't very much like mainstream information. So it was sort of a little bit overlooked in anatomy books and things like that. So I guess he had a hard time trying to find how it would help running form.
Yeah, effectively, the guru James Earl was a specialist with respect to fascia and tended to lecture more to yoga people who are interested in stretching and flexibility, and not so much to runners, which is why there wasn't the information. And James seemed to coin this term that Shane uses quite a lot of tensegrity, which is sort of an integration of tension within the body. Shane goes on to describe a situation. If you look at a skeleton, everybody sort of looks at a skeleton and goes, okay, there are the bones. There's all the bones in the skeleton, and all the muscles are going to be like supported by the bones. So the skeleton is the key thing. But in fact, if you take the skeleton, you just look at it, the bones themselves, if you just left them on their own, would all fall apart.
They don't touch.
They're actually held in a sort of tension system. They don't touch each other. Yeah, that was a critical thing. In fact, the wires that connect the skeleton models, so the ligaments and the fascia around the various pieces of the body, are a critical part in holding the body into a sort of holistic type of tension. And this term tensegrity, integrated tension within the body, is one that he uses repeatedly. In fact, he has a little model with some elastics and some sticks, which if you go on YouTube and look at it, it's kind of quite nice in terms of making sense of the way the tension works.
Yeah, so if you want to see the tensegrity model, he actually does an interview with a girl called Wild Ginger Runner on YouTube, and she gets like a form analysis from him, and he shows the tensegrity model, so you can actually go there and see that.
It's worth doing because it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
You see when he holds the model, it's all in perfect tension. And then when he bends it, like we would bend because we're at our desks all the time, how the tension disappears. And he gives some in the wild examples of this. He goes to Iten in Kenya, which is where a lot of the very fast Kenyan runners come from. He talks with Wilson Kipsey, who says, one of the things he does is he runs tall to stretch so that he can run fast. So he kind of almost intuitively understands this, that everybody in Kenya seems to be really elastic. And then is that because of their genetics or is it their lifestyle? And if you don't have that, could you teach yourself to get that? So the book kind of progresses through why people are like that, how you could be more like that.
Yeah, and he starts to implement little little tidbits like that with certain runners. So he because he was already kind of a form coach, and he would work with runners, but now he's starting to have these little insights from his trips to Kenya and Ethiopia, and he starts to tell runners, like, for example, the run tall. So he actually starts to tell his runners these things, and some of them respond very well to certain pointers like that. There was a fell runner named Nikki that he worked with. She had a really great running form in the hills, but was not good on the flats and didn't actually even like flat running, but I think wanted to get better at flat running. And so he told her to think tall, graceful, elastic, fluid, synergistic, and connected. And that was sort of her little mantra. And she ended up improving a lot just by focusing on that. Not even, it wasn't even a question of improving her fitness, which was obviously very good. It was just to think of the way she was moving differently, and her race results improved.
That was Nikki Spinks from the UK. She already had pretty good form, and one of the things that Shane remarks about her form is that she actually comes from a farming background. So she never had a desk job, and she's never had the sort of posture destroying experiences that a lot of people in the Western world have had. This is a repeating thing that comes up. People in the villages in Bukoji and the villages in Iten in Kenya all come from more rural backgrounds and all have naturally better posture. And people in North America and people in Europe tend to come from schools and work jobs at desks,
where you're sitting all day,
destroying their posture, being hunched, and for this finding their way into their running and affecting their running. I guess once I saw this, I started to look very critically at some of these people, and it's true. You're walking down the street, you see some joggers go by, and you go, oh, not great posture, sort of hunched over, shuffling, they're not bouncing, they're not tall.
Mm-hmm. Their head is sort of like bent forward.
Yeah.
Because they've been staring at a screen or their phone for hours.
And then I look at a video that you took of me, and I look exactly the same as those people. I go, oh no. But the good news is that gives us some scope to improve.
Exactly, because he actually finds that what you do in your everyday life will affect your running. So he actually worked with the diving team in Great Britain, and there was a diver, and she was like at the top of her game. And she would always, when she was diving, she kind of went off to the side a bit because one foot was kind of pointing out more than the other. And so when he kind of noticed this, that was Shane sort of noticed that, she was like, oh, okay, so I'm gonna fix this. But she just did dive after dive after dive, and it didn't work. Every dive he would film her, and every dive she did that. It was sort of like just as she was bouncing off the diving board, like her foot would go to the side. And so eventually they were talking kind of, I guess, after the diving session or something, and he noticed that she was, I don't know, at least girls, we always do this, we're kind of standing with our weight all on one foot all on one leg, sort of like with one hip kind of higher than the other leg kind of relaxed, and we have all our weight on. So she was sort of standing like that. And so he told her, he said, "Oh, do you always stand like that?" And she said, "Yes," because this is it was sort of like without thinking, her default posture. And so he said, "Okay, so now try whenever you're standing to always think of standing with your weight equally distributed on both legs." And so this girl was like an Olympian. So obviously she wants to do absolutely everything that she can to get better. And I think she was Olympic medalist hopeful. So she started to really pay attention to her posture, and he came back to analyze her again, and he filmed her, and the foot stopped going out, didn't tilt towards the outside anymore. So that was pretty interesting. Later in the book, he actually says that your myofascial system renews itself every 7 months or so. If you change your behavior, you'll actually change your fascial system.
But normally you don't change your behavior and your new myofascial system renews in the old bad setup, but because it's renewing all the time, you have a chance to start again. So you can always start, and when the best time to start is now. I think suddenly the thing that I realized when I was hearing these stories is that everything that you do in terms of your posture, your standing, your sitting, where you place your back, how you're balanced, which muscles you're using, every time you go for a jog, you get an opportunity to practice some good things that you can transfer into your running posture that will benefit you. So if you're listening to this now and you're sitting in your car, how are you sitting? Are you crunched? You could be sitting driving your car and actually make some adjustments to how you're sitting in your car, which is going to help your running. If you're sitting at a computer, you could make some adjustments now, or if you're standing, or if you're walking. He talks through in the second part of the book the sorts of things that you should be looking to do. Obviously, you can be videoed and analyzed, but not everybody is able to do that or afford to be able to do that. But what that means is that all of the time, not just when you're running, you could be getting into either good or bad habits, which will either improve or negatively affect your running. And then I suddenly realized, oh, okay, I'm not sitting very well. I better sit better. And every time I'm watching TV, I start to go, I'm slouching again. Mm-hmm. Okay, sometimes you just want to rest, but you can actually, do some good things.
And because we did mention that, we videoed each other. So that was one of the things that Shane really encourages. He says, without even getting an analysis done by him, it's a good idea to video yourself running in different situations. So like running a workout, running easy runs, running in a race, because then you can be aware of how you're moving, because sometimes we're not aware and we actually don't realize that we're doing all these things.
I mean, one of the first things he talks about is running tall. And I noticed when you did the video of me, and I was thinking while I was running, I should try to run tall. So I look good on the video. And then when I saw the video, I was looking quite tall, except I had my head bent over. So I'm actually carrying a bowed head, and I wasn't lifting my head. And it was obvious in the video, but when I was actually running, it just felt normal to me because that's how I've been doing it for the last 5 years. And then when I saw the video, it was kind of obvious. I think your partner, he drew a little line along my back and then along my head with a big angle on it. And I thought, oh, he's right. So I need to, when I'm just sitting around and when I'm also walking or jogging, I need to practice lifting my head. And in 7 months' time, when my myofascial system has renewed itself, and I've been doing that for 7 months, it becomes natural. It becomes a habit, and you don't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah, so all the stories he has in the first part of the book are mostly about, the people he's trained and sort of, I guess, his own process in discovering the myofascial system and the things that will influence it.
And boy, does he journey.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, I mean, just to quote some of the places, he's from England, so he does some ultra running in various towns in England, park runs in Cardiff, visiting people in the fells in Yorkshire, Chamonix, France with the UTMB, the Amazon jungle in Peru, the Arctic Circle in Sweden,
The
the
Sahara
Sahara
Desert.
Desert in the Marathon des Sables, etc., etc. I mean, it's a fantastic little travelogue, and he has examples in each of these places where there's something happening, and there's an aspect of running posture, running style, or gait analysis that can help either a runner who has an injury or a runner who's excellent but wants to be super excellent, and is looking to do the very last finesse, or is somebody who's coming back from a setback and needs some help.
Then in part two is called The Foundations, and he kind of explains, I guess, what he discovered is the foundation of running. The first chapter is called The Foundations, and one of the things he says is become a student of your movement. So what that means is like
Be conscious.
Be conscious, yeah. He also mentions at one point to create a mantra for yourself. Like it's sort of like a list of self-checks.
The first 4 weeks, my mantra was lift your head up. That was it. I was just working on that, trying to get it to improve.
And that's what he says. He says sometimes you just need to work on one thing at a time. But then once you know sort of the things that you need to remind yourself of often, you can cycle through them. Like let's say during a race, you're getting tired. Then you can say like, okay, run tall, a little later. Okay, where am I placing my feet? Or those kinds of things. But at the beginning, if you're working on changing your movement, then you kind of want to do one thing at a time. And he starts with really the foundation is foot placement. Shane says that foot placement is really important because it's your link to the ground, and your feet have kind of like 5 jobs. So to create stability, to optimize proprioception from the nerves, to optimize elasticity, to optimize the dissipation of impact, and to control the level of deceleration and forward propulsion as we move. He says like the foot placement is super important. And what he says about foot placement is with all these schools of thought about perfect running form in the last few years, sometimes you'll hear like, oh, you need to run 4-footed. That's the best, to be a 4-foot striker instead of a heel striker. And what Shane says is actually what you want to do is be a midfoot striker, because you want to use your foot as a tripod. So you should land with sort of like the outside of your first metatarsal, the outside of your...
Ooh, that's complicated.
So let's say, it's a bit hard to explain because we don't have video, but
fine with the diagram that he gives you in the book. It's kind of obvious, but he talks about a tripod landing, so a simultaneous landing on 3 points. I mean, the 3 points are your foot just behind your big toe, your foot kind of just behind your little toe, and your heel.
That creates like a triangle.
And that should be like the whole thing should be down.
Yeah, that's what he says is optimal. And the reason that you don't want to land on your heel is apparently that the heel, well, first of all, it's not stable. And you don't have, I think, as many nerves there. So you don't sense your motion.
Yeah, he's not extremely complimentary about modern shoes either, is he?
No, he's not.
It kind of affects your ability to feel what's happening, and you don't sense it very well in the first place. So by wearing thick padded shoes, you're even sensing it even less, and you become kind of not conscious of the bad things that you're doing.
He's measured impact forces, and the same person, if they wear maximalist shoes, which are sort of the very padded ones, they create higher forces than when they wear like minimalist shoes, which I guess kind of makes sense because your body kind of preserves itself. So you don't want to come crashing down when you're not having very much cushion underneath.
He also says this tripod landing on your foot in terms of helping you to feel the ground and be elastic in your response. And, the more elasticity response you get, the more free energy you're getting because you're not having to use muscles. You're just using the natural flexibility of your body, so it's more efficient. But he talks about that giving you the opportunity to oscillate more, which I found quite interesting because, like you said in the intro, you think, well, if I'm oscillating, I'm wasting energy. But the book actually says that a certain amount of oscillation that you can get from your free energy from your elasticity is a good thing.
Yep.
Because it's giving you time to do things with your body in terms of creating some space for you to increase your cadence, to move forward.
And he actually says that some of the runners that he's measured the vertical oscillation. These are like sort of the Ethiopian runners or the Kenyan runners that are very, very fast. They actually oscillate a lot up and down. I think he said like 15 centimeters of vertical movement. And like when you look at your running dynamics, like
it's just ridiculous. I mean,
the range they recommend is like much, much smaller than that. So goes to show you that maybe your Garmin watch doesn't know everything. So when it's telling you that you're unproductive, you shouldn't listen to it so much.
Yeah, told me I was overreaching this morning. Thank you, Garmin. I'm working like crazy to build my mileage. I think it's worth mentioning that just struck me while you were talking there that we're talking about different aspects of observations with respect to running, but Shane is actually an absolute scientist. He comes along and puts monitors all over people, and he does that with people in the wild. So they're running not on treadmills, not in false environments, but in their real running environment. So actually running on actual surfaces, in actual events, on actual terrain. And one of the things that endeared him to the Kenyans, I think, in either the Kenyans in Itan or the Ethiopians in the Koji, maybe both, was that he persuaded them to let him put sensors over their athletes. And they said, "Oh, we don't know that we're very keen. We never get any feedback on this." And he said, "No. I'll give you real feedback on what's actually happening with these athletes now here in the field." And that was one of the beauties of some of the scientific approaches that he had. And then he's taken that into a complete, with his website, into a complete service, so to speak, in terms of analysis. So when he talks about 15 centimeters, it's not like, well, I'm estimating it from a video. He has sensors all over people.
Yeah, although I think he can do just like video because obviously, well, right now with COVID, he's probably not seeing people in person, but then also, he can work with people that are remote as well. So there's a lot he can see from video, but yeah, when he was working with these athletes, he put lots of sensors on them and things like that. So he had real data. So in terms of something that's similar to what we've all heard is cadence. So Shane says that the optimal cadence, it's actually a range. It's not 180 like like some of the other schools of thought. Sort of they always throw around this 180, but he says it's about between 175 to 185 steps per minute is the optimal cadence. He says that when you start going over 185, then it's not always good because what happens is that sometimes you're moving your legs so fast that you're not getting a full like a full stride. So then your stride is more choppy.
Yeah, basically by going at 180, you're optimizing your body's natural elasticity, especially if you're making this tripod landing and not overstretching. So the body's natural elasticity prefers that. And so you get the most out of the elastic nature of your body. And by getting the most out of the elastic nature, that's kind of free energy. You're not having to burn muscles to get that propulsion effect so much. So that's why it seems to be that that's the optimal cadence. Because everybody talks about 180 cadence, but nobody says, well, why? And this is his discussion. How come?
Also, he mentions like stride length. The vertical oscillation allows you to get a bigger stride length as well. So when you're going up and down, we think, oh, it's like it's wasting energy, but actually what you're doing is also getting a longer stride. So you're actually going forward more.
And also if you're using the body's elasticity, the bounce you get is kind of free. It's not exactly, but it's kind of free, and you're able to lengthen your stride.
Yeah.
And you will get more impact from having that situation. So more oscillation and more stride, longer stride. You'll get more impact on your body. But surprisingly, according to the measurements, the increase in impact is relatively small compared to the increase in benefit. that you get. So you get a little bit more impact, but you get a lot more benefit.
So the other thing is posture. So in order to get the benefit, your posture needs to be good. Shane, like throughout the whole book, talks about running tall.
Yeah. This is what I've been trying to do for the last
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5 months since first coming across this book. Run tall, run tall, run tall. Head up, head up, head up. And I think it works.
Yeah, you've definitely gotten faster, so I can tell it works.
I don't know if it's all due to Shane. I'd like to take some of the credit.
So a fun fact, so like about running tall, it's sort of about aligning your whole body, but also your head. And he actually has, so he has some stats about your head. So, you know, because like we're sort of in a culture where we spend a lot of time in front of a computer or staring down at our iPhones while we're walking down the street. And so our head is sort of like not in line with the rest of our body. And he says, so our head normally weighs 12 pounds. And for every inch that your head tilts forward, you add 10 pounds to the weight of your spine, to the weight of your head, but the weight is sort of has to be supported by your spine. So that's really
That's a
interesting.
lot.
It's a lot.
I probably was tilting my head about 3 inches. So I was carrying 30 pounds extra.
Yeah, so your head was weighing 42 pounds.
I can't afford to carry a big head like that. That's a huge head.
Yep. So another thing to think about, and another good reason to, I guess, set up your desk so that your computer screen is at optimal height and that you're not slouched over your computer like I am most of the time.
Yeah, and I'm fine. I'm correcting myself all the time. I've done it about 6 times since we started this conversation. But yeah, overall, with respect to to posture, just go and look at any film of Eliud Kipchoge, the best Kenyan runners, or Kenenisa Bekele, or some of the best Ethiopian runners. And you see this sort of got their chest out and up, their head tall. They're running extremely tall. They're bouncing. They're oscillating quite a lot. And just critically look at them. That's the posture that Shane describes as optimal. Look at those guys. And then next time some joggers pass you in the street, look at them with the same sort of perspective. I think we all go, well, these guys are super runners, so that's why they have good posture. But some of it is the other way around. These guys have super posture. That's why they're such good runners.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of saying, well, I am what I am, and this is kind of how I run, and this is the speed that I can do, try to place yourself consciously into the posture of a Kenyan or an Ethiopian and practice it when you're doing small, easy runs and see what that does for you. And what I found, in fact, it was a problem for me because I was doing easy runs and all my times were coming out too fast.
Mm-hmm.
Because just by practicing the posture, it was because I was trying to do a 180 cadence as well and bounce more. And without realizing it, suddenly you're getting faster and faster. And I was going, ooh, too many fast, easy runs.
Mm-hmm.
Slow down.
Maybe don't do it during your easy runs. Maybe a better idea is to do it during your workouts.
You have to practice the movements.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could be right.
The best way to practice that is probably strides because they're short. They're sort of like little 100-meter, 20 seconds, maximum 30-second pickups. And so anybody can hold anything for 30 seconds, let's say, and you won't be too tired. So you won't be, because that's the thing is like when we're doing, let's say, a hard tempo run, then we end up sort of getting to the end and just being like exhausted and our form completely falls apart. So if you're really working on form, probably it's the best time is when you're doing sort of shorter bursts of faster running. It's good to think about it all the time, but I don't want to be doing an easy run with Alan when he's thinking about his form because that's way too fast. So he actually talks about arms, which like he has a whole section on just like your arms because people, we're runners, so we always work out our legs and we think of our legs and we think of what we're doing with our legs, but our arms are actually really important in providing propulsion. And so he goes into your arm swing, and so you want your arm swing to sort of be forward backwards and not kind of all over the place. And I actually notice that in a lot of my like race photos is I notice I kind of have chicken arms. Like I've noticed this before. I didn't, it's not since I read Shane Benzie's book. Like I've always kind of noticed that like my elbows are always sticking out like all the way in no man's land. And so I'm trying to work on that by, doing things like when I do my push-ups. Now I don't do like regular push-ups. I try and do the push-ups where you keep your elbows by your side, and they're much harder actually.
So we got a new nickname for you? Chicken wings?
Yeah, chicken wings would be a good one, because like that's really what my arms look like when I'm running, or at least in those race photos. Like I don't know if it's that those race photographers just wait for that moment where my arms are sticking out like chicken wings and that's when they take the photo. I don't know.
Shane actually gives some great examples about the use of your arms and the importance of your arms and how to balance your body using your arms through some studies he did with some Paralympians who don't have all their arms, all parts of their arms are missing, and the effect it has on their body, and some of the work he does to try and help them to correct that.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I started to get conscious because it makes a difference. Shane tells us, started to get conscious about carrying my telephone or carrying a water bottle handheld. I've never been a big fan of handhelds, but I do on easy runs carry my telephone. It actually creates an imbalance, which is actually going through your whole body, and it's not zero,
but it can have a big effect. So those phone carrying cases that's strapped to your arm, Shane doesn't think that's a very good idea, because it's always one side. And the handheld water bottles, I have to say that I've really wanted to like those, and I've found that I don't like them because my
I guess
arms
the answer is have two small ones.
Then you're balanced. Yep.
And my first reaction is to sort of say to these things, I'm not an elite. Some of the runs I shouldn't have to practice these things. But in fact, if you're going to build a habit of changing the way that you run in order to get to a point where you're changed and you don't have to think about it anymore, you need to practice it. You need to practice it all the time if you can. I think you do need to take a little bit of notice of these things, and if you're going to change a habit, you need to change it. No, you can't say, well, I'm going to give up smoking on Wednesdays and Fridays and Mondays.
Yeah, that
and the other days I'm going to smoke. You can't do that.
And Shane actually says that everybody should be interested in performance, no matter their level. And I have to say that I agree with him, because,
Absolutely.
Even if you're running a 5-hour marathon, like what's your goal? You're going to finish that marathon in 5 hours and 5 minutes. And what are you going to say? Oh, I need to register for the next marathon because I want to go under 5. But that's performance. Like you're trying to increase your performance. So everybody cares. It's just, I feel like sometimes they don't, admit it to themselves.
Yeah, it's true. I think everybody does care to some degree at their own level.
Yeah. The next thing is something that I think we've sort of heard before, but he promotes something called natural lean, which he describes as leaning from your ankles. And he really distinguishes this from, like us modern day computer office workers.
Yeah.
When we lean, it's usually because we're folding at the hips, which that you don't want, because then you're preventing yourself from using your elastic system. What you want is to be tall, but then be leaning, like your whole body's leaning from the ankle, is how he describes it.
I haven't really got to that bit yet. I'm still trying to run tall, and I figure that I don't want to be focusing on too many things at once.
Yeah, so once you start focusing on the natural lean, he says like to try to increase your pace by leaning forward instead of increasing your pace by trying to put more muscle into it, like most of us try and do.
Yeah.
What you want to do is try and lean forward from the ankle, and so you have no choice but to move your legs faster and have a longer stride. It actually reminds me of this, I guess it was like a bit of a drill we used to do. We used to do these sort of like strides on the soccer field. So strides, it was just kind of like a pickup. You just run fast down the soccer field. And we would do them from the standing position. And before you start, so you had to kind of like lean your body until you thought you were going to fall over, and then you would sort of take off into a sprint. I wonder if that drill was
could
kind
be.
of trying to teach us that.
I mean, the other way is run uphill, but keep tall, which is probably the only bit that I've been trying to do because I'm still trying to run tall. So when I'm on the hill, I go, okay, don't lean into the hill, just run tall. But effectively, because the ground is sloped, you're leaning from the ankles. He talks a little bit about breathing as well, but doesn't go into that like hugely. I don't think it's a big part, but talks about mouth breathing in line with cadence. But one thing he does go into in some detail is the mind. The fact that the mind is a key and critical and important aspect of your running form. Just being conscious of what you're doing and seeing that by adjusting your form, you can get some free elastic energy. And so effectively, it doesn't feel as hard. Because what he says is that it's not necessarily the amount of effort that causes you to slow down, but it's how much you perceive that effort, which is sort of subtly but importantly different. Not are you tired, but do you feel that you're tired? So there's a benefit to be had from mantras and being also conscious of your checklist with respect to your body. I found that this sort of works effectively if you're going through your checklist saying, okay, how's my landing? Am I doing my tripod landing? Okay, am I bouncing? Is my oscillation good? Is my head up? Am I running tall? Is my chest out? Is my pelvis tucked in? Have I got my arm movement going well, correctly? Not crossing over, not doing chicken wings or whatever it is. Are my heels lifting? And you go through that checklist and you're just mentally putting yourself through that checklist. And then you get to the end of it. You feel you're making the same amount of effort, but in fact, your speed has gone up. So you have the same perception of effort, but you're getting more speed out of it. Absolutely, that works. How long you can keep it going for, I don't know.
It helps distract you too, I think. I mean, that's what it is for me. You think about something else, and then you're not thinking about how hard it feels.
Yeah, you're probably right. It's probably that as well. That's why people put music on, distracting themselves from their effort.
Sometimes that distraction might not be so good, though.
This distraction is kind of positive because it's pushing you into a better posture that's more efficient.
So I guess the last section is the practical, and it actually has all the same like sort of subheadings as the previous section. So he's got foot placement, cadence, stride length, posture, the head, the arms. So he's got some of the same, it's a bit of like a similar layout, except it's more like what to do.
Tips and tricks.
Yeah, so like I think that section is sort of the shortest section because he's talked about everything in previous chapters. It's almost like a recap, and it's almost like a now go out and try it kind of section.
Yeah, like foot placement, he'll say, well, I've told you all about the foot placement, tripod landing, etc. Now go and video yourself. Don't take your own mental word for it, because what you think you're doing is not what you're actually doing. Take a video, get one of your buddies to take a video of you from the side and from the back or the front, and see what your foot is actually doing, because your mind plays tricks on you because it's used to whatever it is that you've always been doing.
So for cadence, he actually proposes to use a metronome, which most Garmin watches have on it. Like it's just a function that'll beep. You can have it beep sort of every second step or every fourth step or something like that. There are different settings, but and then you can adjust the cadence. So you can choose like 175 or 180 or 184 or whatever. So he suggests trying to run with a metronome to adjust your cadence. But he does say, like in the past, I think that a lot of runners have heard that this is almost like the thing that's most important about your running form. But he says, no, cadence should not come at a cost to your movement. So yes, it could be good to improve it, but like it seems like this is not sort of like the primary focus, or shouldn't be.
Yeah, the more I read about it and the more he discusses it, the more you realize that the whole thing is a package. I mean, I've been talking about focusing on running tall, but in fact, you have to almost do everything, and you mustn't sacrifice one thing to improve another, because that's kind of negative. It's a bit backward moving. If you going, okay, I'm going to increase my stride length to get more speed, And then you end up heel striking because of that. You're kind of getting more speed, but you're getting more braking as well on the heel strike, and you're getting less elasticity in terms of bounce. And if you force yourself to increase your stride length, it's going to cost you a lot of energy, and then you'll get tired quickly.
Yep.
You'll go, well, I increased my stride length, like he said, but I just got exhausted towards the end of the race, and I ended up being slower.
Yeah, he actually says increase your stride length by getting more bounce instead of increasing your, increasing your cadence or.
Because you still got to get your tripod foot landing underneath you, even though you've got a bigger stride.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're working against yourself.
He actually talks about running downhill and running uphill. It's almost like two separate skill sets for those two types of running. Like certain things that, let's say when you're normally running would maybe not be okay, but if you're running downhill or uphill, it is okay. So he mentions in running downhill that your cadence can increase a lot, and it's okay to increase your cadence. And he even says that some elites reach a cadence of up to 240 steps per minute while they're going downhill. But normally, like, he doesn't believe that you should just, infinitely be increasing your cadence. Running uphill, he says, like, because we're kind of taught to lean into the hill, but he says no, because you don't want to lean at the hips. So it's sort of like you don't want to be bending, kind of, when you see runners that look like they're almost sitting while they're running, so that you don't want that.
He talks about driving your arms more forward.
Yes.
Or a bit more, bringing your hands up bit more towards your chin so that your legs will also follow that. He's a big proponent of the fact that your arms tend to dictate what your legs will follow. So if you pick your arms up, your legs will pick up a little bit more.
And he actually says to keep your arms at a 45-degree angle, which is actually very compact. It's actually sort of what you see when you see the really good marathon runners. They don't have their arms sort of all the way down at 90 degrees. They're really like kind of compact.
And their work tends to be from their elbows rather than from their hands, elbows back rather than arms forward.
So in posture, he tells us to imagine an elastic band from the foot to the top of the head. And what your goal is to keep tension in the elastic band. So when you're trying to run tall, it should be your whole body, not just sticking your chest out, but like your whole body. He says that it's, if you are an office worker, he actually says use a standing desk, and that when you're standing at your standing desk, you should stand the way that you want to run. So you should stand with your weight evenly distributed, and, not kind of like a lot of us stand well, I guess I could speak for myself. Like I usually like lean on one side or the other side when I'm standing. I never just stand. So Shane says that we shouldn't be doing that.
We're sorry, Shane. We're terrible. We'll be better. We'll try to be better.
I've really, really tried to work on this because I kind of have a setup at home where I can stand, because I have a little like platform that I put on top of my desk, and I can kind of stand for a little while. And I noticed that, as soon as I'm not thinking about it, I'm always kind of like standing on one foot, not evenly distributed like Shane would. Shane would not be proud at all.
Yeah, if you want tips and tricks from Uncle Alan, after reading this book, I've started practicing my posture in the shower. So you're in the shower, or you're standing in the shower. You've usually just had a run, so you're thinking about your run. And you go, okay, so how am I evenly balanced? How's my posture? So I tend to do that. Gives you something else to do while you're showering.
For your head, he says, your head should be up with your eyes on the horizon, which I kind of have a hard time with this, because my boyfriend Andre, he laughs at me all the time because I'm always like looking where I'm putting my feet, because I'm afraid of stepping in a pothole and like twisting my ankle.
Yeah.
And that's especially true if I do trail running. I'm so not confident on the trails. Like I will always be looking down where I'm putting my feet. But Shane says that, with your head up and your eyes on the horizon, like that's how you're going to keep your head sort of above your spine and not tilted forward, like you're like as if you were looking at your iPhone.
Yeah, so I think we have to practice on terrain that's a little bit more safe to begin with. And then gradually, as our oscillation improves, our feet will be a little higher. So we'll have less concern about tripping over small things. And I think that's how it'll come. But baby steps. have to start on easy terrain.
With respect to arms and hands, so I never really thought about what I did with my hands, but he says that you should have your fingertips touching to close the loop. I actually never really thought of that. Like my hands, I usually don't think about what I do with my hands.
What, you mean like your fingers touching your thumbs or your
Yeah.
fingers all touching each other?
So from the way that he describes it, I think what he means, he says to have the fingertips touching. So like I think what it means is, you know, when you do like okay, where you kind of have your thumb and
Yeah.
your index finger
Yeah.
together.
And the rest of your fingers all next to each other?
Exactly. The rest of your fingers kind of next to each other, and they should be all relaxed. But I've never yeah, I have a hard time with this. I don't know if I could run like that. It feels kind of weird, but maybe I need to give it a chance.
Need to get Shane on and ask him about it.
Yeah. Other than that, he says to relax your shoulders, which is something that I think most runners kind of consciously try and work on, because we all realize when we're all sort of scrunched up and our shoulders are like up beside our ears that we're not very relaxed at that point. And then one interesting thing he says about arm swing is that so your elbows should never come in front of your rib cage. So when you're swinging forward, like you don't need to swing so high that your hand is like in front of your face, because then your elbow is in front of your rib cage. So you what you're doing is most of your swing should be behind you, so your elbow should be behind you, and when you swing forward, it shouldn't be like basically I think the muscle goes into the backward swing of the elbow.
He talks about driving your elbows back, not driving them forward, driving them back and keeping
exactly
your posture tall. And then you get a natural swing forward, and then it kind of all works together. Okay, and you know, he talks about with respect to your mind, you know, having a little checklist to go through. So, am I landing? What are my hips doing? Am I tall? What's my head doing? How are my arms moving? And to go through that every so often, to just visit in every so often and just do a check. So you make a little adjustment, then eventually you'll get into a new habit.
Yeah, he's got a final word of wisdom at the end of the book. He says, take ownership of your movement instead of buying new shoes.
Yeah, my view would be, yes,
Let's
take
do
ownership
both
of your movement, but get some new shoes to celebrate.
Yeah, I kind of like that better too.
I think one actual practical observation with respect to shoes is that, okay, if you've got a cushioned shoe, it's stopping your proprioception with respect to your foot placement. So that's why Shane doesn't like necessarily the sort of new tendency towards huge, thick midsoles. But what I've observed as an older runner is that the thicker midsole has enabled me to have less concern about planting firmly. So I'm able to actually follow some of the instructions from Shane by using the newer shoes to put more downward force into my plant, my tripod plant, and hence help my oscillation. So in fact, I'm using the information from Shane's book to influence my running form, but I'm also using the shoes to help me a little bit because I'm a bit older and I don't have the muscle strength necessarily and the joint strength that maybe the younger runners have. And I can put a little bit more downward force into my running form with the help of the shoes. So that's just an afterword from my older runner perspective.
Yeah, and Shane's not here to say if that's, you know, good or bad, but I mean, I guess if you can implement, you know, what he's the tips he gives us because you have nice cushioned shoes, then why not?
Exactly. Why not indeed? Now, all of the barefoot runners and the minimalist runners will now hopefully write in and tell us why not.
Mm-hmm.
We're happy to be corrected. In the book, there's an epilogue in the book where, in fact, Shane goes back to Iten in Kenya some 6 years after he was first there, and he manages to meet with the famous Brother Com, who is the renowned trainer of a lot of the Kenyan elites, and is able to spend some time with him gathering data from some of the elite athletes, which is quite a prestigious thing because this guy is quite a recluse and doesn't see that the Western world often give him much good feedback, so he doesn't bother himself with the Western world very much. But in fact, Shane was able to give him all the data in real time and build a good relationship with the elite coach in E10 in Kenya.
So I guess we should give our thoughts on the book.
Overall views on The Lost Art of Running by Shane Benzie and Tim Major. From my point of view, the idea of running form is kind of fascinating. I think originally I came from a school where your form was your form and you couldn't really do much with it. So it was great to be able to open the book on that and to start looking at it. And the treatment that Shane offers us, I think, is quite unique. And for me, it's something I've never really gotten into much. So it's groundbreaking and new. I'm super into these things where I haven't done them much in the past because they offer then huge room for improvement. I would say as an older runner, I've been able to get more out of my running in the last, let's say, 1 year, simply by consciously focusing on how I'm running. So my form in terms of getting the best elastic benefit I can out of my posture, etc. In the book also, Shane takes us all over the world in terms of different runners and events. So there's a great adventure there. He clearly loves traveling and likes to go to different places, and he meets with some very prestigious people in some very prestigious situations. So that makes for good reading. And then there's a little practical session, which you can tell by the discussion that we've just had that we're pretty interested in. We've been videoing each other and checking each other for chicken wings or head that weighs 40 pounds or that kind of stuff. It's clear in the book that Shane is passionate about this subject and he provides good learning and inspiration. And I think what I said in summary on the end of my synopsis was everybody in the Western world should read this book. Preferably, they should read it while standing up because sitting seems to be our disease.
Yep, well summarized. I also thought that it was a great topic. In the past, I would have been a little hesitant about a running form book because with my background and I had a coach that was sort of not really into running form. And then like sometimes the things that you learned about running form just seemed very black and white and not always easy to implement. And I like that this book, it's not he's not really sort of black and white. Like he always acknowledges that there could be differences, and so that's why the things like the cadence has a range. It's not like a specific number. It's not your cadence should be 180. No, it's there's a range. And he does even sort of say that it could be that the cadence that's most efficient for you is outside of that range based on your body type. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't explore and try and work on it and see what happens when we work on it. But he does always acknowledge that it's not a black or white thing. And sort of the things he gives, like the tips, are very actionable. So things like videoing yourself, anybody can do that. We all have smartphones now. So I really enjoyed that. I like to see what it can do for me. And I learned a lot of things about how the rest of your life can influence your running. I guess makes sense, but it's not really something that we think about. We're always, at least for me, I was always sort of like, well, my work life is my work life and then my running life is my running life. But no, like they influence each other. And I'm very happy to have learned that vertical oscillation is not all bad, because I think that, I've always had a hard time of keeping my vertical oscillation below like 10 centimeters. So I'm glad that I actually don't need to do that. The book, I think I would recommend it to anybody that would like to improve their running form. And even if you think you don't want to improve your running form, I'm telling you, it's not that hard. I think it would be useful for anybody. The only thing was, I found that there were maybe like pictures lacking. There was, the picture of the tripod landing, but I found that,
That's a good point.
Yeah, I find that for us, we're experienced with running. We've kind of heard other theories and things, and we've watched a lot of YouTube videos, and so you can kind of by the description understand what he's saying. But I think that maybe for some more beginner runners, it's a bit lacking in that respect because it's really mostly text. When we were reading the book, Shane didn't have this website that he was working on, which I guess now he does. And maybe some of that is to bridge the gap between like the visual and the description of what good running form is. So I guess we'll see.
If I'd like to sell you the book, I would say, would you like to run faster without having to train harder? And would you like to learn to run faster even when you're not out running? Practice running faster even when you're not out running, just through your posture adjustments. Well, this is a book for you. Why wouldn't you want to do that?
Everybody wants to do that.
Yeah. So thanks for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. Big thank you to the publishers, Bloomsbury Sport, providing us with review copies of the book. If you'd like to leave us some feedback of how we can improve the podcast, or want to suggest a book for us to review, or just want to tell us all the mistakes that we made during discussions, please feel free to send us an email or leave us a comment on social media. We're Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter we are reviews_running. Please feel free to follow us, download the episodes on your favorite platform as they're released, or follow us on any of the social medias. That's all from Running Book Reviews. We'll see you next time for another exciting episode.
Thanks for listening.